Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets, a family podcast of pirates and penguins. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, and our adventures near and far as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
And it is our 100th episode. Yay! Insert cheering here.
Yay. So, wait, so if there's 52 weeks in a year and we do an episode a week, that's about 2 years?
We've been doing this for about 2 years now.
Wow.
We skipped a week here and there as needs have arose, but yeah, we pretty much 2 years. Does it feel like we've been doing this most every Sunday for 2 years?
Kind of yes and kind of no. I mean, on one hand, it kind of feels like we just started, and the other hand, it kind of feels like we've been doing this forever. So, you know, I guess 2 years feels about right. It is
kind of funny just to think about, like, it's been going on that long. I mean, honestly, like a little behind the scenes, I didn't know if this was something that we would do, like whether it would last, whether we could sustain you and me chatting about things, sort of like, because we talk about stuff, but is that a podcast? So I wasn't sure whether this was a thing that would last.
Right. I mean, I did marry you because you were good to talk to.
Yes. That's the only reason.
The only reason.
I married her for her looks. I got the eye roll. And because she's good to talk to. And so many other reasons. But yeah, I mean, I figured we could talk. We talk plenty well. I'm good English speaker now. I'm good at English. And but yeah, so 100. We're not doing a special 100th episode thingy, but you know, I'm
too tired.
Well, you'll hear why in a minute. So in the ongoing saga of injuries among the Bettinellis and our health foibles, poor Sophie, she hurt her toe this week.
Yeah, on Monday.
She was walking outside.
She was
barefoot?
running. She was running.
Okay.
Outside. She came in, and both of her feet were like spattered with blood. It looked like she'd been in a major accident. And it turned out to have been she stubbed her toe on the pavement and didn't notice that it was cut and just kept running. And then came in sort of when she realized that she was a mess.
So it wasn't like a terrible wound.
No,
I mean, she didn't notice it at first.
Right. But we had to do some serious cleanup before we could even figure out where the cut was.
Yeah.
And so she ended up with her big toe wrapped in a big gigantic bandage just to kind of cushion it. And so then she's been hobbling around all week with this
and stubbing it on things.
Yeah.
And every time we'd be like, oh, poor toe. And then that eventually became Puerto Rico.
Then how's Rico doing today?
So her toe is named Rico now. And because we are a family of punsters, and that's just the way it goes. So Puerto Rico.
Do you remember when we first started dating and I convinced you that I didn't like puns?
Yes, that was very strange.
I was going through a phase, I think.
You're going through a very strange phase. And I'm like inside going, shoot. So I avoided punning for a while.
And then you met my family.
And then I met your family, and I'm like, oh, I have been rickrolled. I have been punked.
I mean, I wouldn't really set out to punk you. I just was really not into puns for a while or something. I don't even remember what was going on in my head.
Oh, your wacky 20s.
Yeah, I was barely 20, but that's okay.
You were barely 20?
I mean, I was almost 30.
You were almost 30. Well, no, come on. 20 years ago? Wait, how old are you now? 46?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 20 years ago. You were in your 20s. You were in your mid-20s. Anyway.
I was in my late 20s.
Okay. Whatever you believe constitutes the late 20s, I will go with that. Starting at 26. So today, as we record this, because we record on Sundays usually, it's Mother's Day.
Indeed.
Indeed. And as we have mentioned many times, we are not the ones to celebrate arbitrary days, all that, with all the fanfare. And I know, like, some folks, they love to celebrate every potential holiday and things, and power to them. Hey, I have no problem with that. But we just don't really do that. I mean, if I, like, I have had people say, like, you don't get her something, like, she really, like, even though she says she doesn't want it, she really does. And I'm like, no, she really doesn't.
I mean, I wouldn't say no if you, like, got me something. I wouldn't be offended, but, and you have sometimes got me flowers or chocolates or something, but yeah, it's a day.
It's a day. Yeah. Just like birthdays.
Our original plans for today were to go visit your mother because you haven't seen her in a while.
Right.
That fell through.
Well, so at first there was a misunderstanding, miscommunication with my brother, with whom she lives, and so it turned out that she was actually in Maine this weekend with my sister, so that wasn't going to happen. And then it's just as well, because starting Thursday, Isabella started feeling ill.
Yeah, she had a sore throat, and then she started coughing and sniffling and just was feeling miserable.
And then Ben started feeling ill, and that's when
and one of my friends is like, dude, you really should go.
You should get a COVID test.
Get a COVID test.
Yes. So we have made it a whole year without any of us having to get a COVID test. Like, without any of us getting sick, showing any symptoms that we thought, maybe
I mean, I had to take
test.
one before my surgery, like the sort of pro forma pre-surgical test.
That wasn't I'm worried I might have COVID. This was just, so in a way, we've done very well. And so you took her to the CVS. Now, oh my gosh, CVS.
Okay, so
what is wrong with CVS?
The registering for the test was really easy.
Online.
It was. I used the online on my phone. It walked me through the thing. Like, I got an appointment within 20 minutes at our local CVS, which is a couple minutes away. So we were great. Drove there, got there just in time, and pulled up to the drive-through window and, said, hey, we're here for our test. And we gave them the confirmation code. And then we waited and waited. And the guy kept coming over to the window and saying, sorry, it's taking so long. And then finally, after we've been there for about 25 minutes, he comes to the window and he says, I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties. We're going to have to talk to a nurse practitioner. Can you just, like, go sit in the parking lot for 5 minutes and then come back? So, okay. So we drove around to the front of the store. We sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes, and then we came back, and now there were 3 cars in front of us in the drive-through because the people who had been waiting behind us while we sat there for 25 minutes.
Yeah, what was the point of having you go sit in the parking lot unless you send everybody in the line?
I think from inside, they can't tell if there's anybody else waiting behind me.
Okay, but what's the point of having you go sit in the parking lot for 5 minutes and coming back to the window? Like, why not just have you wait at the window? Like, for 5 minutes. You've been there for 25 minutes already. Wait 5 more minutes.
Well, I think they may wait 5 minutes, and then it would probably be there would probably be somebody behind me, and so it would be more than 5 minutes wait. But they would only be telling me to wait 5 minutes or something like that. I don't know.
Nah. Okay. Anyway, go on.
Anyway, so now then we have to wait for all the people who are behind me to clear.
Who are now in front of you.
Who are now in front of me. One of whom I saw, like, putting like 3 different COVID tests into the box. So
the car full of people getting tested.
Yeah. So we finally got back up to the window, and he apologized profusely again. At that point, it had been an hour and a half.
Yes, I'd been texting
waiting.
you.
You're like, where are you?
What is going on?
And Isabella and I are saying, if we had known it was going to be an hour and a half wait, we would have brought water and books and snacks.
Because you can't go into the store because you might have COVID.
Right. So we can't go into the store, and we can't really leave and go home. Yeah. But
this is an endemic problem with CVS, because I don't know but anyone else out there, but we are constantly having troubles with this particular CVS. Every time we go in, every CVS, their computers are down, their computers are wrong, the app on the phone doesn't work correctly, the text message, like the phone calls, the automated phone calls are screwed up, like they're all mangled, like the voice prompts are out of order. So it's like giving you I have to puzzle this message back together. It's like a cryptographic. I have to puzzle the message back together again.
I mean, the people who work there are very nice. I love our pharmacist.
Yes,
and I have to say that the registration process worked really well, and we got the test results in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, that's good. They texted it to you. You got it. That's good. Those parts were good.
But the actual experience of waiting at the store, and maybe it usually works really well, and we just got there on the really bad day, but
yeah,
it was a really bad day.
Based on my experience of CVS's computer systems, I'm saying that it wasn't just a bad day. We shouldn't leave people hanging. So the result was negative.
Yes.
Thankfully. And we had a feeling it was going to be negative because I started having symptoms, sore throat, just generally not feeling well, very tired last night. And I've already had my vaccinations. So it was extremely unlikely that I would be sick with COVID. So it's probably either allergies or cold. I'm
going to go for cold because I usually have really bad seasonal allergies, and I have had like nothing this week.
Have you seen the pollen everywhere?
Yeah.
The pollen's all over everything.
But I'm not really maybe suffering.
Yeah. Maybe your immune system is pumped up.
Maybe for the first time in my life, I'm not having seasonal allergies when everyone else is. I don't know.
Or your time is coming.
Or my time is coming. I'm bracing myself.
Brace yourself. Pollen is coming. So yeah, COVID test. We're out of the woods on that one. So I was reading something. We were talking about this earlier. I was reading this really interesting thing about flu this past year.
Mm-hmm.
So in the usual year, so in 2019. 20,000 people in America died from the flu. 20,000. The year before that, it was 34,000. So usually it's a lot of people. In 2020, 600 people died of the flu. 600. Because of all the precautions that we were taking. The isolation, the masking, the sanitizer.
Also, they were really pushing the flu shot hard this year.
Well, yes. They in fact mandated it for all kids in school.
I mean, our pediatrician was like, you really, really should get the flu shot.
Right. So that said, so the precautions we took basically knocked down the flu to almost nothing. And yet 600,000 people in America have died from COVID. It shows you how much worse COVID was than the flu. All that talk about it's just the flu. What's the big deal? It was kind of astonishing to see. And I have to be honest, these, apart from allergies, it's been a pretty good year, knock on wood.
I have to say, we have had a lot less bugs. We haven't had the flu, or we haven't had lots of colds.
Yep. Which means going forward, I'm sticking with the hand sanitizer whenever any of us are feeling not so good. When it's flu season, it's wearing masks out. I'm not going to worry about it now. I mean, at this point, wearing masks is normal, Although I've seen a lot of news articles about wearing masks in public and people being afraid of not wearing their mask in public. I'm like, that's got to be like a city Boston thing, because around here, outdoors, nobody wears a mask.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like at the open house down the street, sure.
Well, yeah, but that's in and out and very close quarters. But if I'm going for a walk, I'm in the parking lot at the supermarket, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but we still do have a mask mandate in Massachusetts.
There's
for indoors.
There's an indoor one. They've lifted the outdoor one. There was an outdoor one for a while, but they've lifted that. So that's good. And they've loosened up a lot of restrictions, which is awesome. And there's anticipation of a lot more restrictions getting loosened up as we get into the summer, which, yay. So one of the things that I noticed, seen a lot in our local police blotter and our local town Facebook group, is people talking about, we've had a rash of car break-ins, and people talking about, oh yeah, my car was unlocked and they got my wallet and my mom's iPhone, and I'm like,
why are you leaving your wallet and your phone in your car?
Unlocked car. Who does that? Why? Who leaves valuables in your cars? And so I posted it on Facebook, and I got people like, oh yeah, down here in Texas, someone was in Texas, people are getting their shotguns stolen off the gun rack in the car all the time. I'm like, what?
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of insane.
I have had my car broken into twice in my life. Once when I was living in Texas, they actually broke into my car and stole my car. And from my the parking lot in my apartment complex. And then once when I lived in Salem, somebody broke into my car and like rifled through it and looked for stuff.
Was the car locked or unlocked?
Okay, when it was broken into in Texas, it was locked. They broke they broke the lock on the car door.
Oh, interesting.
So I had to then, not only did I have to pay to get my car from the place that had towed it, but I also had to pay to get the lock fixed. I was in the hole for like hundreds of dollars.
Because some jerk stole your car.
Because somebody stole my car and went on a joyride with it.
If only there was insurance to cover such things.
Now, when my car was broken into in Salem, it was the night after we had driven down, my roommates and I had driven down to New York in my car, and I had not been driving on the last leg to Salem to home because I had a migraine. So one of my roommates was driving. So I cannot vouch for whether the car was locked because I was not the driver.
Right.
And I had a headache and I was just like, get me to bed.
So I had my car broken into once. Yeah, just once. In the parking lot of a church in Lowell, Mass, where I was helping run a teen confirmation retreat. They broke into my car, stole my jacket.
Oh, no good deed goes unpunished.
And stole my tapes, my music tapes. Eric Clapton and stuff. And also my Christian music tapes. I'm like, yeah, hope you listen to it and feel guilty. Yeah, that was frustrating. Yeah. Oh, and they did try to hotwire it. They were trying to like tear in the old cars with the ignitions. You could, if you could get inside the ignition with a screwdriver, you could start the car.
Yeah, that's what happened to my car when it got stolen. So I had to replace the door lock and the ignition lock.
Yeah. So I had incompetent car thieves, thankfully. So. Oh well, no, like you said, no good deed. So lock your cars, people. Don't leave stuff in them. In fact, one of the things that I saw someone talk about was they tried to break into the house.
Okay, that scares me.
Lock your doors. It's been getting worse around here with that sort of thing. Yeah. There was a bank robbery down the street this week.
A bank robbery?
Someone robbed the Envision Bank
in Holbrook.
So it was funny. The police put up the pictures of the bank photos of the guy. He had a hoodie on that was cinched down tight. That was his disguise. It was Kevin from South Park.
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's normal for everyone to be wearing masks, so nobody noticed.
He wasn't wearing a mask.
He wasn't wearing a mask.
No, his face was uncovered. Like he had a big long beard. You could see it.
Seriously,
dude, you could have wore a mask. It would have been okay.
Nobody would have known. Like nobody would have noticed when you walked in wearing a mask.
Exactly. It was
something I've contemplated multiple times this year when like walking into a convenience store. Like
I've been in a bank at least once or twice this year. I don't go to banks very often. I go for the Scouts. I'm the treasurer for the Girl Scout troop. And I went in once with a mask on, and I'm like, oh, this is weird. I don't feel right. I'm not doing anything. Like, I don't want to say the word robbing the place. I don't want to be misunderstood. But yeah, so it was like he had this big long hipster beard. It was really, so things are getting rough here in Holbrook.
Did they catch him?
Not yet. He's got his pictures out.
I bet he went home and shaved his beard.
Well, that's what I would do. Like, think about it. Look, if you look at me, you've never seen me without my beard.
Only photographs.
If I wanted to go on the lam, I would shave my beard and shave my head. No, you wouldn't recognize me. Never mind anyone else.
I would recognize you.
Nope.
I would recognize you.
So, anyway, let's move on to talk about what we've been eating. So this week you made pulled pork. We've talked about your pulled pork before, that where we make it in the
Instant Pot. I make it in the Instant Pot and then crisp it up in the broiler.
And we took the leftovers, and you made pulled pork quesadillas. I was raving about these quesadillas because this was like restaurant quality food. This was so good. What did you do with these quesadillas that made them so good? Do you remember?
Lots and lots of butter.
Okay, that's the trick.
I mean, really, it was just like corn tortillas, and they're not even great corn tortillas. They're just what we get at Stop and Shop, which is not high quality corn tortillas.
This is not a high quality corn tortilla.
I'm sorry, I'm Texan, and I've got standards, and you do the best with what you've got.
Yes.
So just corn tortilla, lots of butter, throw some cheese down, put down some pulled pork, and then jalapeno slices.
The pickled jalapenos.
Yummy. Mrs. Renfro's pickled jalapenos.
Oh, yes.
Really good. And because some jalapeno slices are too thick, and Mrs. Renfro's has the nice thin slices.
Yep.
I like those. And then some more cheese, and then another buttered tortilla, and you just cook it until it's nice and brown and crunchy.
You flip it. That's one of the things that distinguishes restaurant food is restaurant kitchens, because I've worked in a restaurant kitchen, more than one. They don't skimp on things like butter, salt, oil. And when you're most home cooks, we are very parsimonious. We don't want to use too much butter. Don't use too much oil. Don't use too much salt. We've been ingrained in it's got to be healthy, so don't use too much of that. And you can use too much salt and too much butter and that sort of thing. That can happen. I've done it, but you can be more generous with these things than you usually think you can. Most foods, like home cooked foods, are undersalted. I think a lot of people undersalt their food. Make sure to.
I grew up with my mom was on a low salt diet for her blood pressure.
Right.
So it was pretty much like nothing was salted, and then we salted at the table, which is, that's right. Different.
Our parents were told butter will kill you. Too much salt will kill you. Too much oil will kill you. All of this stuff has basically been disproven to a point. Too much salt. Yes, you shouldn't have too much salt, but the amount of salt that we were told we could eat safely, was too low.
Right. And only some people with high blood pressure have the kind of high blood pressure where a low salt diet improves it.
Right. For most people, it doesn't make a difference.
For most people, it doesn't make a difference. I do know some people for whom it does make a huge difference, and so they really do have to.
But your doctor will tell you that. Salt. Yeah, but your doctor will tell you that. Yeah. So
I actually didn't have the pulled pork quesadillas. I had leftover chicken in mine, which was also really good.
Mm.
Oh, I love that combination of the chicken, jalapenos, and the cheese.
It's the Mexican three cheese Mexican blend.
4 cheese.
4 cheese Mexican blend. It's the store brand. It's the
Stop and Shop brand.
Yeah. Works out really well. We buy it by the huge bag. We make a lot of Tex-Mex food, but even in omelets and stuff.
That's what I use for my omelets. I just use the Mexican cheese.
Right. It actually, it's a really good blend.
Speaking of omelets,
I
had the best omelet this morning.
So we went to the market. This is
farmer's market.
The farmer's market.
Yeah.
This is not a digression. This is a background.
Right.
And one of the things that was at the market this week were asparagus.
Fresh asparagus. Now, grocery store asparagus just isn't the same style. It almost tastes like it's not the same plant.
It's like in-season peaches versus out-of-season peaches.
Yeah. Even out-of-season peaches they're peaches. I'll eat them. I like peaches. But yeah, it's different. So this asparagus, I cooked it up with a little bit of onions, a little bit of garlic, lots of butter,
and
it was just perfect. And so, but we had none of the kids were really interested in eating asparagus. Those who usually will eat some were just not in the mood or something. I don't know.
Oh, I love asparagus.
And so there were like 5 or 6 spears left, and so I chopped one up and put it in an omelet this morning after
with the farmer's market eggs. From our favorite Copperkid Farms.
Farmer's market eggs, and I cut up some mushrooms and sautéed them with some onions, and then put the asparagus in, and it was a perfect omelet.
Those eggs were gigantic. They were huge. These eggs were huge this week. It's amazing. I had some over easy eggs for breakfast today with there's a new bakery. We talked about it last time, and this week we got a farmhouse white loaf.
Oh, the bread was
spectacular. My gosh, perfect crumb, perfect density. It wasn't too dense, wasn't too airy. It was perfect.
I'm a decent baker, but I have to say, when we get the artisanal breads, I can't bake breads that are that good.
It's not your skill, it's the oven. You do not have a baker's oven. That's the difference. A baker's oven gets hotter and has steam, and that's the big difference. A bakery steam oven is going to make all the difference in the world, which is why back in the day, people didn't bake at home. They baked at the bakery. They got their bread from the baker. So yeah, it was really good. It toasted it up, had it with the eggs. Oh, so good.
Oh, and on my toast, I had some of the raspberry jam from the farmer's market lady too.
The other thing we got at the market this week were the mushrooms. So this time it was Namikos and blue oysters. Blue oyster cult.
No.
I'm running from you. So blue oyster mushrooms and the Namikos.
Right. I just sauteed those really simply with butter, garlic, wine.
That's what the thing with the mushrooms. That's like I struggle with how do I make them so that they don't get lost in whatever dish. And sometimes I look up dishes for them, and it's like, you know what? I can use baby bellas and shiitakes for that sort of stuff, but for these special mushrooms, I want to taste the mushroom.
Right.
And they were so good. In which
case, just a little bit of garlic and onion, just kind of
butter, plenty of butter,
lots of butter, and some white wine. After the mushrooms have started to get kind of a little brown.
Yep.
So you wait until they've absorbed all the butter, and then you keep cooking them, even though the pan looks really dry, and eventually they start getting juicy.
Right.
And then you keep cooking them, and they start to brown.
Right. Mushrooms, when you cook mushrooms, they will exude moisture until they disappear. You know what I mean? There is a point at which you want to.
I've never seen them disappear.
Like they get small, not literally disappear, but they get smaller and smaller. Like mushrooms are mostly water. So or at least, well, the store ones are. Now that I think about it, the market ones probably aren't as moisture dense like that. But yeah, so yeah, you cook them once the butter's gone, and you cook them until they brown again, and they start getting exuding their moisture again, and then you add the wine,
and then a little bit of wine, and let it cook down. Yeah, the wine really just like adds that extra.
So yeah, good market stuff this week.
The boys are not into mushrooms, but the girls are all like mushrooms.
we had to make sure we get mushrooms before they eat them all up. I haven't had any yet. Don't eat them all. So yeah, that was good. That was the Saturday after the farmers market. That dinner is always a good vegetable heavy dinner with lots of good veggies.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
nice green fresh salads.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what we've been reading and watching. So for me, I watched the first episode of the second season of the show I talked about before on the History Channel called The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, if you've been a listener to the Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, episode 35, something like that, in the 30s, that's one of my favorite episodes, and it's a lot of people's favorite episode.
It is a seriously, like, do not listen to that before bedtime.
It's super creepy.
It is creepy
because it's this stuff in it. You're like, there is not a rational explanation for some of this stuff. And so there was this History Channel series. First season was last year, where this astrophysicist is invited to go to the ranch by the new owner and do some investigations. There's a lot of reality show shtick in it. I mean, it's just that's what it is. But there's stuff in that happens in the recording of it. Some of it's like, I can explain that. But some of it is like, unless they are actively hoaxing the audience, which that's entirely possible. It's possible. That's really hard to explain. So this first episode, there was one thing where this one guy, he's a guard, he has an iPhone, and when they start digging on the ranch and he's standing there, like his phone goes crazy. It unlocks without him putting in his passcode or doing the Touch ID. It goes through all the apps. It starts dialing things at random. And they're like, this never happens elsewhere. And, it's being hacked by some outside force. And I'm like, well, time out. It doesn't necessarily mean someone's literally actively hacking it. There could be some weird electromagnetic something going on that's messing with the phone. That's entirely possible. But an intelligence hacking it, like doing something specific to it, that I have a hard time with. What I would love for the History Channel to do is take the phone and send it to Apple and say, can you tell us what's wrong with this phone? Because it's doing this stuff, and here's a video of it.
Yeah.
That would impress me if they did that.
That would be...
Yeah.
I have a feeling a lot of these shows reality shows, they're not really interested in debunking. They're only interested in like
hyping.
Perpetuating the excitement and mystery.
Right. Well, they don't want to like reveal the secret of the ranch, all at once.
But do they want to reveal it at all? Like, are they really trying to get to the bottom of the mystery, or are they just trying to?
Right. Well, that was like the one we were talking about before, and I don't know if we talked about it in the show or not. But the Secret of Oak Island, there's been a series about it that's had like 5 seasons of this mysterious dig on this island off of Nova Scotia, and they've had 5 seasons of this. It's like, what could you like? Have you not plumbed the depths, literally and figuratively, of this mystery yet? Like, what else are you talking about? Are you dragging this out? Yeah. So there is a little bit of dragging, but there is real, like, they got a hydrologist who they bring to the ranch because they got this weird stuff going on with water drainage and where's the water going, and he can't explain it. Guy gets radiation burns from opening up a cistern, but yet there's no source of radiation in the cistern. Weird stuff. Lights in the sky, things, creatures or something in around them at night, But do they don't have like clear footage of something? Like if they got like clear footage of a creature or a ship or something, that would be something. But there's enough that's happened at Skinwalker Ranch that it has my interest, and I'm continuing to pay attention. So it's fun popcorn entertainment. I do usually watch it at night in the office alone, and I get really creeped out. I start looking over my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Brain, stop doing that, brain.
Mm-hmm.
So then what I've been reading, I haven't finished yet, but it's the second book in the Iron Dragon series. I talked about the first book last year, and so I've gotten around to the second book. And so the series is about these 23rd century humans who get thrown back in time, which is they didn't know was possible. So they're out of time and they don't know how to get back. Who end up, some of them end up crashing on Earth. They were trying to land, but instead they crashed. Their Earth is in a war with these aliens who are trying to wipe out all humanity, called the Chotan, and one of their ships got thrown back in time too, and they crashed as well. Long story short, they need to build. They're in the 9th century Europe. They need to build a spaceship to get back up to orbit using the knowledge that they've brought back, just the knowledge, no technology, but the knowledge they brought back from the 23rd century, and whatever resources they can devise in the 9th century.
They don't have any technology at all.
They do have some. They have their main ship is still in orbit with most of the crew, but they don't have a lander, and they can communicate with the ship. So what they've got is the database of the ship, which has the sum total of human knowledge sort of stuff. They have Wikipedia, right. 23rd century Wikipedia. And they have experts who can talk them through things, medical, all the science and all this sort of stuff.
So the ship can't leave because
it has a part that it needs.
Okay.
And so they were going to land to get materials in order to reconstruct the part. That's why they were landing.
Right.
But they crashed. And so now they don't have a ship to get back up into orbit. So they have to build a spaceship and collect the materials in order to repair the ship. So the project is can we build a spaceship in the 9th century using with knowledge, but only 9th century workers? And
this sounds a little bit like the premise of Iflheim by Michael Flynn. Except
but it's aliens who crash.
Except in Iflheim, it's aliens who crash on Earth in the
Renaissance?
No, Middle Ages, like 12th century.
Okay.
13th century.
Yeah.
It's about the time of the Black Death, 13th century.
Right.
But again, the aliens, their ship is broken. They need to figure out how to make the part to repair it using the technology of the peasants at the time.
12th century.
Right. First they have to communicate with the people and who are scared of them and think they're demons. But fortunately, there's a priest who is sort of very scientific minded, and he talks to them. But the aliens also have a problem in that they can't metabolize Earth food, and they're running out of the food that they like. Earth food doesn't have some sort of key element or nutrient that they need in order to survive.
Yeah, that sounds similar. So one of the premises in the book is that the future spacemen have to operate on is the immutability of history, which is they're going forward on the assumption that nothing they do will change the course of history. That history plays out as it will immutably.
So they're not worried about paradoxes.
Right. They can't. They've decided that they can't be worried about paradoxes, about changing the future. They can't worry about that because otherwise they'd be paralyzed and would have to just give up. They'd have to go, live out their lives as.
So there's none of this, Marty. If you don't save your parents and make them get married, then you're never going to exist.
Right. So like they encounter a Viking who helps them, but who also wants to take out his revenge upon Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, who was the United Earl of Norway, but we know from history that Harald lives to a long, ripe old age and dies in bed. That sort of thing. So,
right.
So they basically say you can't kill him. He's not going to die. So there's no point in trying to carry out your vengeance. History says he lived. So therefore.
But they don't try to convince him not to.
They kind of say something, but things happen. But what's interesting is like it also reveals how much we don't know of history. Like we know a lot of facts, like the Vikings tried to take the siege Paris in the 9th century, but failed. But we don't know details, and we don't know about like who built the siege engines and who was this guy and what was about this. Like we were just talking about this article I read in Archaeology Today a few weeks ago about this civilization they discovered in the middle of Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan that no one had ever heard of before about 25 years ago. And it's this major civilization that existed for 500 years and it got swallowed by the desert. And now they're just rediscovering it. It's like, there's so much we don't know about history.
Right.
People and places and stuff. So
that was actually one of the interesting things about, speaking of Eifelheim again, is that book sort of went back and forth between the medieval event and researchers in the 21st century who are trying to figure out what happened. And so there's a historian and his girlfriend who's studying this period, and his girlfriend is a physicist. And so she actually ends up seeing one of his drawings and saying, oh my goodness, that looks like a circuit diagram. And she connects it with her research and like interdimensional stuff, and they figure out that travel of dimensions between dimensions is possible based on the alien technology, which was recorded in a medieval manuscript.
Oh, wow. Well,
but it's interesting because he spends all this time trying to figure out what happened, but the records are so few.
Right, exactly.
And at one point he starts to get this feeling like he's found out all of these names of these people who lived in this tiny village, which has disappeared. And he's like, I kind of feel like I know them. But when you compare like what he actually knows to what you, the reader, actually know about that village, he knows nothing.
Yeah.
He has a list of names and a few facts about them, but he doesn't know anything he doesn't know the people. Right. He doesn't know the story.
Yes. That's the thing. And actually, there's something similar happens in the Iron Dragon. It starts with the discovery of an astronaut's helmet in Iceland, a helmet that's over 1,000 years old, and the Air Force and a bunch of government types are all and scientists are freaking out. And so that's where so we go from there to.
So they did leave a trace.
Well, they left some kind of trace, yes.
Interesting.
Yes, an astronaut's helmet. What else they left, we don't know, because we then jump into the story from there. So this is the second book. It's called The Dawn of the Iron Dragon. I think there were at least 2 more. I'm not sure.
A long series.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. So what have you been watching and reading?
Okay, so I first of all, I'll do reading.
Okay.
I read a short novel, juvenile novel. Again, I'm on my juvenilia kick recently, called The Breadwinner. It's the first in a series that's set in Kabul, Afghanistan, during the time when the Taliban are in power. And it follows a a young girl whose family was once well off, but now because of all the fighting and the bombing and stuff, their home was destroyed in a bomb, and they moved to a smaller home, and that was destroyed, and they moved to another place, and so now they're down to, they have only a very small handful of possessions, and they're living in one room, mom, dad, and 4 kids.
Okay.
And her dad's lost one of his legs, and her mom, who used to be a teacher, is now unable to work because she can't even leave the house. She hasn't left the house in a year.
Because of the Taliban.
Because of the Taliban. She could technically leave with her husband, but the thing is that he can't really get around, and she's just like, if I can't go under my own power without you to escort me, I refuse. I'm just going to stay in the house.
Okay.
So the protagonist is a young girl. I think she's about 11 or 12. I forget. Who she accompanies her father to the marketplace where he sits and reads and writes letters for people. So he's come down from like being a teacher to being a scribe in the marketplace, and he can't work any other job because of the government doesn't like him.
Okay.
Etc. So he then ends up getting arrested. Like the Taliban break into their apartment, and no explanation of why he's arrested. And the girl's family are stuck. Like, he's the only person who's been making money, and now he's gone. They're going to starve to death unless they do something drastic. So her mom cuts off her hair, puts her in boys' clothes. Her older brother had been killed in the bombing. And so she goes out to
get a job,
be the breadwinner for the family. So she starts off just doing what her father had done as a scribe in the marketplace. And then kind of goes on all these adventures. It was it wasn't graphic too badly because it's aimed at small children. I mean, it's aimed at kids. It's like a middle school novel.
Right.
But she gets beat up. Her mom gets beat up by the Taliban. Her father gets arrested and disappears. There are some definitely grim elements to it. I wouldn't give it to a really young child. I'm not sure I would read it aloud because I think that it would be too disturbing for Lucy, but I'll let the older kids read it if they want.
Right.
But yeah, I really like the reading about other places through juvenile novels because I think they're a little bit easier to get into and to read about, and they're not too graphic. They're not too like, we have to show you how horrible and gritty and real it all is, because they're trying to tone it down a little bit for a younger audience. But you still get a lot of the feeling of what it's like to be in a particular place and time.
Right.
So yeah, I am looking forward to reading the rest of the series and letting the kids read it.
Yeah, Anthony seemed really interested.
Yeah, I described it at dinner, and the kids also thought it sounded kind of interesting.
A slight tangent, by the way. So I saw a link to this website that explained how an internal combustion engine worked, and it had these great animated illustrations, these cutaways, and that the guy who wrote the blog created. It was an excellent illustration or explanation of internal combustion engine and how it works. And so Anthony saw me looking at it. He wanted it, so I sent it to his phone, and he immediately went and read the entire thing. It was not a short article either. And he's like, "Wow, that was really interesting." Like, that kid absorbs this stuff. It's just amazing.
He really likes engineering and how things work, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
he has that kind of brain.
Yeah, it was a great article. I tell you,
I'll have to read it.
Yeah, I'll see. I gotta remember to put a link to that in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what
did you watch?
Watching, I watched
without me.
I watched Wandavision.
We were gonna watch it together. I wanted to see it again, and
I'll watch it again actually because I still have questions.
Okay, good. Questions must be answered. So, all right. Tell me about Wandavision.
I really liked Wandavision a lot. I'm still kind of processing what I think about it. So I watched it in 2 nights. like I watched a bunch of episodes back to back to back to back to back, because when it's all online right there, it's really hard not to. I mean, the episodes are so short. You're like, and they end on a cliffhanger, and you're like, okay, I need the next one.
Yes.
I need to find out what happens next.
But pity those of us who had to wait a week to watch the next one.
On the other hand, I was talking with some of my friends, and I think that there are disadvantages to watching them back to back, which is that I didn't have time to stop and think about what I had seen.
Right.
And so
process it with a group of other people.
Process it and talk about it. So like my friend Rebecca said that she had like anticipated and like guessed some of the plot twists ahead of time, because like she'd had a week between episodes to sort of ponder about what was going on. So again, there are advantages to watching it back to back, because you don't forget what happened last week. On the other hand, you don't have time to ponder what happened last week either, because it depends on how closely you're watching too. And I generally don't watch super closely the first time I watch something, and I have to go back again. I'm kind of like the way I read too.
So, I have to know. So, what were the key things you pulled? You generally see things in these superhero movies that most people I talk to about them don't. So, I find it interesting what you saw in this yourself. What did you pull out of this?
Okay, so I actually sat down and I started thinking about like, what are the themes now that I've finished like all of the movies through Endgame, and what are the themes that come through in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that they're exploring? Because there are some themes that you kind of see recur again and again and again. And I came up with a list of 4 themes that all appear in WandaVision. There are other themes that didn't really appear in WandaVision that are in you could trace through several movies. So first of all, the question of power and responsibility.
Right.
With great power comes great responsibility. What responsibilities do I have because I have this ability, this power? And I think the great temptation that Wanda faces is the temptation to lay down her powers and disclaim all responsibility. I don't want to deal with having powers anymore. I'm ready to give them up if I can just lay down my responsibilities and live in this fantasy world.
Right.
And it's interesting to see how that's a different take on the power responsibility theme than you see in some of the other movies. But this question of what responsibility does having power give you is an interesting question.
Well, it's the Spider-Man question is that he gets confronted with, but that his Uncle Ben tells him, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. And of course, the question, the flip side of that is, does might make right? Does having power make you necessarily in the right? And I think that's very clear in WandaVision that being powerful does not at all make her in the right.
No, in fact, she's very wrong.
She's very wrong
through most of it.
Okay, so then the other question is, the other theme that I think is very connected to that, but I think it's distinct enough to pull out as its own theme, is the questions of heroes or monsters. Do these superpowers make you necessarily a hero or a monster? Can a hero become a monster? Can a monster become a hero?
Or is there can a hero be something? Can you be something in the middle?
Right. And I think that question is really interesting in WandaVision, because I think that while what she does is clearly monstrous, I'm not convinced that she is therefore a monster. I think that she's behaving in a way that's understandable but not excusable.
Does sin necessarily condemn you for all time, or is there redemption for your sin?
Right. And I think that I think that the series, a lot of people, I think, were unsatisfied with the way the series ended, because it is not clear at the end if she is going to be redeemed, if she is redeemable. I think there are a lot of hints that she is redeemable, but her story isn't over. It's clearly an episode in Wanda's story. And
Right.
so there's not a solid resolution yet. It's kind of like, there's not a solid resolution to Tony Stark's story after the first or the second Iron Man. Like,
Right.
you don't really get his resolution until Endgame.
Well, the MCU is not. It's not like nothing. None of the pieces really stand alone. I mean, they are a complete story. Oftentimes, the movies they have a beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
But there's an arc, and there's a story that's continuing for each of the characters, and the characters change and grow through the movies, and in this case, through the series. And you'll see that when you watch Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's the same thing.
Right. So I think that Wanda does have a definite arc. She changes, she grows. I think she's in a better place at the end of the movie than she was at the beginning of the movie through the middle.
The series.
The series, rather. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think that her story is over, and therefore there is a certain sort of open-endedness at the end of the series.
Was that all your? Was there one more? Okay.
No, there's actually two more.
Okay.
The most interesting theme I think that's come out of the Marvel movies, Marvel Cinematic Universe, is the theme of trauma and grief. And I think you see this most clearly in Tony Stark, in Iron Man. In Iron Man 3, he's clearly processing post-traumatic stress. I mean, he is just a mess.
Right.
And I think in WandaVision, you clearly see that Wanda is a person who is, like, she is so traumatized that she's basically dissociated from reality.
Yes.
And because she has so much power,
that dissociation can...
It's literal. Like, she literally creates a bubble. And I think it's interesting because grief does have this tendency to make us want to pull away from the world, to retreat into ourselves, to retreat into, in The Breadwinner, when the father's arrested, the mother lays down on the couch, turns her face to the wall, and lays there for days. And the kids don't know what to do. Wanda has that same impulse. I'm going to retreat into myself, except that she's able to externalize that internal reality where she's living through what if it hadn't happened, the stage of denial, except her powers allow her to really live in denial, to create a world in which Vision isn't dead.
Yeah, she's literally living in denial.
And I mean, I think that was a really fascinating theme that this series delved into deeply. I read an article that talked about how Wanda sort of moves through the various stages of grief. And then finally, the last theme is the theme of family. Family in the Marvel Cinematic Universes acts as a center of sanctuary, a retreat from the duties, the call of responsibility, but sometimes it's also a competing duty.
Right.
So Wanda sort of has the both. She's sort of retreating to sanctuary in the same way that Hawkeye does.
Mm-hmm.
His family is his safe place where he can just forget about the rest of the world. And it's a duty. He has a duty to his family. And yet there's this other pole, this greater duty because of your powers, because of your abilities, to the rest of the world. And Wanda's trying to retreat into this family sanctuary idea. And she even has, to some extent, a sort of duty to this family that she's created.
She has literally created a family. I mean, by the end of it, those kids those are real kids.
Well, I think that's one of the interesting questions that the series doesn't fully answer, but I think
how real are they?
How real are they? Are they really just figments of her imagination, or is she really creating life somehow?
Well, not just somehow. She's. I mean, yeah. I don't want to get too much into it, but yeah.
Now, a lot of my friends, I went back and I read what the chatter that had been going on months ago when WandaVision came out and was airing weekly. A lot of people felt that the major twist ruined or changed to its detriment
the revelation of a major character near the end.
Right. I actually disagreed. I thought that character developed all of these themes and worked really well as an externalization of Wanda's
internal conflict.
Internal conflict.
Oh yeah.
I think this character represents the monster that Wanda could be. The thing about superhero movies is that very often the villain acts as a sort of mirror of the hero. Right. They are the hero's worst impulses, the monster that is in us, our dark side, but made into an external conflict as opposed to an internal conflict. A lot of people
literally in the Superman, in the like DC universe, literally these big supervillain is called Darkseid.
Right. And I think that a lot of people were upset because they had this sort of Wanda having an internal conflict switches to an external conflict. But I think that's really what superhero movies are, is that this big, dramatic, world-shaking, external conflict. But the external conflict is a symbol. It's a metaphor for what's going on internally.
But even as you were just saying, Wanda's break from reality was not internal, it was external.
Well, this is the thing, is because she has so much power, when she has an internal break from reality, it has external consequences for all of the people around her, because she can.
So she's not she's not just having an internal conflict, there's also an external conflict that has to happen to break up this external dissociation from reality.
Right. And in a way, it's only something that's external that could really break her out of it. And she's created a good enough barrier that the external people, Darcy and Monica and Jimmy.
Yep. Yes. Jimmy.
They can't really break through. They can't get through to her despite what they try to do. They just aren't powerful enough. And so you kind of need a powerful antagonist to show her mimetically, this is what you are becoming.
It's almost like the fire, the whole acorn, certain trees, their acorns only
pine cones,
they only grow if they go through a forest fire, that sort of thing.
Yes.
There has to be this
bristlecone pines.
It might be bristlecone pines. I don't know. I saw it in movies. So, but there's almost like this, like that's the case here, where it's only through this external friction force, this oppositional force, that she can really be forced to confront who she is, what she's doing. I mean, this external character, this other character, we're trying to safeguard spoilers here, but this external character makes her confront what she is and is doing. Also,
this character offers her a Faustian bargain. So I really liked that this became a very classic theme. Faust, Mephistopheles, this is the bargain. All it takes is your soul.
Right.
But you can have what you want. And this is a classic Faustian bargain that Wanda is being offered. You can lay down your power, you can lay down all responsibility, and you can have this fantasy world.
Right.
But what's it going to cost you?
Right. Right. So good.
So yeah, I'm a fan. I'm actually working on an essay which I hope to be posted in the next couple of weeks or so when I get around to finishing writing it. But
all the interruptions of life.
Yes.
I'd be curious to see. I don't know if I've heard if there's going to be a season 2 or not, or what they plan to do, where they plan to take Wanda and Vision.
Right. Is this just a one-off season or series, or is there going to be a season 2, or is their story going to be developed further in a movie?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next up, Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yes.
So, and you'll see those themes you talked about. They come up big in Falcon and Winter Soldier. So
right. I feel like not enough criticism that I've read, and I haven't read extensively, I just barely skim the surface, I'm sure, really looks into the themes that carry over through the series, through the movies. I don't feel like there's enough talk about like really deep themes. It's all sort of character and story.
We really ought to get you on Secrets of Movies and TV shows to talk about it with the other the super comic nerds who have things to say about this stuff.
Right. I mean, I am approaching this as I am a literature scholar. I am not a comic book geek.
That would be great. Get a variety of reflections.
But I think they're fun. I do not think that they are worthless.
Yes, as some have tried to say, as we've talked about recently. Right. All right, so that's what we've been reading and watching. Let's quickly wrap up with this week's Sunday readings. So, because of the question about COVID and whether we were a plague family, we could not go to Mass this week.
I think, yeah, even with a clear test, I would have kept kids who are coughing.
Yes, we got glares. So, yeah, we watched it from home at our parish. We watched our parish stream, which had its issues with sound. We missed part of the homily, unfortunately.
Like this second half of the homily.
It wasn't all. I think it was the half, but it was the last few minutes of it anyway.
It felt like a lot.
Yeah, but the readings this week were good, and I don't want to like miss them because it's the God is love readings. Now, people may have heard different readings this week, depending on where you live. If your diocese celebrates Ascension Sunday instead of Ascension Thursday, then you got the 7 Sunday of Easter's readings this week.
Really?
Yeah, because next Sunday they'll get the Ascension readings.
They just skip the 6th Sunday?
Yes.
Why? Because
they need to get the Ascension readings in, and apparently the 7th Sunday's readings are more important than the 6 Sundays. I don't know. That's the lectionary. That's what the lectionary says.
Okay.
So
that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but having Ascension on Sunday is weird too.
Yes.
So the readings that we heard were for Acts 10. Actually, now I'm looking at the USCCB website, and they're not saying that. What I was looking at, the iBreviary said that the alternative readings for this Sunday could have been the 7th Sunday of Easter, but I'm looking at the calendar on the USCCB site, and they're not saying that. They're saying 7th Sunday of Easter.
iBreviary is Italian, so maybe there's like European rules that.
I don't know. It's weird. It doesn't matter. Let's just talk about the 6th Sunday of Easter readings. First reading is Acts 10, when Peter goes to the house of Cornelius, who's a Roman who has become a believer in Jesus, and he sees their piety, their devotion, the fact that they are the Holy Spirit, the gifts of the Holy Spirit have fallen upon them, just like it has on the devout Jews who follow Jesus, and says, "Can we withhold baptism from them too? Because they've already got the Holy Spirit. How can we withhold baptism?" And this was the spreading of the gospel to the Gentiles in this way, that being received, so that the church became a church of all peoples and not just the Jews.
Right.
The second, I'll come back to this. I just want to mention the readings. The second reading was 1 John. It's God is love, because love is of God. Everyone who loves is begotten by God and knows God. The key verse in that one is, "In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son as expiation for our sins." And then, of course, the gospel is Jesus saying, "If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love. And this is my commandment, love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends."
Okay, but my favorite line from that is, "I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete." I really love that Jesus's joy is in us when we keep our commandments. Not just that he loves us and therefore he wants our good, but he rejoices. He feels joy in us, and that we may have complete joy in him. Like, it's this joyful love, not love as obligation or love as duty, but love as joy.
Right.
I really.
Well, I love, so there's two things, like the connection between the second reading and the gospel. So we're told love is that, not that we, and this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us. We don't have to prove to God that we love him for him to love us back. It doesn't start with, "Oh, you love me? I love you then." No, God already loves us. So how do we stay in that love? How do we stay, it's not that he'll stop loving us. It's how do we stay in love with him from our side? By keeping his commandments. And what are his commandments? Love one another. Basically love God, love one another. And that's it. I often hear, like, see people talk about people who don't have faith, or people who are agnostic, or people who aren't Christian. You know, oh, you Christians, all your rules. You have all these rules. You have a God who's angry, and a God who's very, very stern, and a God who lays down the law and is. No, God is love. He's a hippie. This is love, man. Everyone wants to love everybody.
Unfortunately, I think that a lot of Christians
we've forgotten this,
or never learned it.
Right. We have the Jansenism strain of the no, God is a stern taskmaster who wants to smack you down. You know, he's ready to smack you down when you sin, and you break a rule. And I think sometimes we are tougher on ourselves. I know I'm tough on myself. I have bad internal talk. I commit, whenever when I commit sins or whatever, and I'm like, oh, there you go again. You commit a sin, you jerk, stupid. I'll admit that I have that internal monologue that is not good. But that's not God. God doesn't say that. God loves me despite my sin. And so how do we remain in his love? By loving one another. To love one another as Jesus loves us. So how does Jesus love us? He dies for us. He lays down his life for us, and we're supposed to lay down our lives for one another. And that's why this is a great reading for Mother's Day, because who teaches us in our lives how to lay down their lives for us? Our mothers. Mothers do. You, Melanie, have shown me that. You've done that. Every time you've given birth to one of our 5 children, that is, you literally lay down and potentially give your life. Giving birth is not a safe thing.
Yeah, 9 months of pregnancy also is a lot of laying down of one's life. I mean, really, like, your entire world, your entire life changes.
You literally give your body over to this.
Yeah. And it's not actually a friend of mine was talking this week about, like, she said a friend of hers who had never been a mom asked her, what do you think about pregnancy? What do you feel about pregnancy? Do you like being pregnant? And she's like, well, lists all of the unpleasant things about pregnancy. You spend the first several months nauseous and vomiting all the time. And then you have maybe a few weeks or a few months of not feeling so bad, and this is not too bad, and then you start to feel really huge, and you can hardly eat, and you get heartburn, and your
back hurts, your feet hurt,
your pelvis hurts, everything hurts, everything feels huge. You can't hardly move or bend down or do anything, and yet I do it again. I mean, there's also some amazing, like,
you get a baby at the end of it.
But not just about the end of it, like the feeling of someone moving inside of you. Like, there is nothing. I remember, like, before I was pregnant with Bella, or when I was first pregnant with her and I hadn't felt her move yet, like, trying to imagine what is that going to feel like. And there's nothing that you can even, like, imagine that comes close to the actual feeling of.
I'm kind of jealous of that.
And it's amazing. There is so much about pregnancy that I do not like, and I do not look forward to. At the same time, now that, our youngest is 8 and the likelihood of me ever having that experience again is really low, I have the leisure to be kind of nostalgic about it. And I'm sad. I'm sad that I'm not going to be able to do that again. Although maybe a little bit relieved. But no, that experience of motherhood definitely is the most difficult thing I've ever done. And I don't think I could voluntarily, like, put myself through all of that. Except you're kind of, like, committed.
You're right.
Once you get on that ride, you're on the roller coaster until it gets to the end, and you can't get off in the middle, no matter how scary the twists and turns and curves are.
Right. I mean, but that's love. Love is that commitment. The commitment to the end, commitment to seeing it through. Right.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, being a mom has taught me so much more about love than anything else ever possibly could. I mean, the the Genesis, line, the you'll be saved through childbearing.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of part of Eve's curse, and yet I think it's also kind of a blessing. Like,
oh yeah,
that experience of bearing children and all that it entails, from like through pregnancy and childbirth and being a mom of a newborn and being a mom of, all ages. It is, if you open yourself up to bringing God into it, there is that really profound ability to embrace the cross just by being somebody's mom. Like, that's cross enough for anyone.
Right.
And yet, wow, what a great way to, what a great cross. Thanks, God. Because I really, it's awesome too, because there's all these beautiful people in our lives.
Yeah.
Isabella, Sophia, Benedict, Anthony, and Lucia. They're awesome. I'm so privileged to know them. Every single day I look at them, I'm like, I am so glad that you're in my life. Like, my life would be
they're cool to have around.
So poor if you weren't in it, because you are an awesome person. Like, you're cool to spend time with.
Yep. They're what's the great line from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? You left us just as you got interesting.
Getting interesting. Although I have to say, I think that's really shows how impoverished Henry the Elder's view of his son was. Like he missed all the good stuff. Because
they've already gotten interesting.
They're interesting from the very beginning. Like, I was just fascinated with early childhood, with infancy, with how kids learn from the very day that they're born. Kids are fascinating, like human beings, and how we grow and learn. That's absolutely fascinating.
Yep.
Indiana Jones' dad had his nose so far stuck in his books that he didn't even notice the amazing miracle that was right in front of him. And it's really sad.
Yeah, we saw that clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
He missed all the good stuff.
So, to all the moms in the audience, happy Mother's Day.
Yes, happy Mother's Day, everyone.
And thank you to our moms.
Yes, thank you, Mom, for all you went through, because now I understand so much better.
Yes. All right, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Travis F., Albert A., Megan S., Scott H., and Laurent S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue raising the bets in all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's just from us. If you have anything you'd like to contribute to the discussion, you can do so by commenting at sqpn.com/bets, that's BETTS, or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to bets@sqpn.com. And we'll have links to everything we talked about in our show notes at sqpn.com. Please, if you can, go to Apple Podcasts and give us a review, a nice 5-star rating and a review. That helps us get the word out about the podcast, and also share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community. We've hit 100. We're going for 200. So help us reach more listeners.
Yep.
Until next time, I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest.